Would lowering cholesterol and the LDL carrier be in our best interest as diabetics? Does modern medicine still have this wrong? What critical roles does both cholesterol and the LDL carrier have in our bodies? Would it make sense they were evolutionary built into our systems to kill us? Or are they actually designed to heal and save us? Don't forget to subscribe to this life-changing channel and hit that like button if you learned something new today. And as with all of my videos, this should not be considered personal medical advice. This is my interpretation of the latest research. If you want medical advice, please always consult your physician. Cholesterol is an organic molecule that we as humans cannot live without. As I have mentioned in the episode, Can Diabetics Eat Bacon? It is found in the membranes of all 30 to 40 trillion cells in our bodies. And the main role, it's there to help with fluidity and structure of the cell wall. Critical hormones that make who we are, like testosterone, cortisol, estrogen, and the active form of vitamin D, could not be made with our bodies without the raw material of cholesterol. Cholesterol is so vital, our bodies have evolved many incredibly complex mechanisms to ensure that we always have enough. In other words, without cholesterol, we humans and other animals would not be able to exist. Plain and simple. But when we talk about cholesterol in terms of heart health, we are not talking about cholesterol itself, but rather the structures that carry cholesterol around called the lipoproteins. You know them as the LDL and the HDL particle. Cholesterol is fat soluble. It cannot travel through the bloodstream on its own. It's like an oil droplet in a bucket of water. It simply won't mix. For this reason, the body has evolved to carry cholesterol around our aqueous bloodstream in these complex lipoproteins, which function as carrier vehicles. You can think of lipoproteins as a ship at sea carrying cargo containers. The cargo includes other molecules like triglycerides, fats, phospholipids, and even fat-soluble vitamins. We've all been indoctrinated into thinking these lipoproteins, the LDL and the HDL, as the bad and the good cholesterol. But this is actually inaccurate. All cholesterol is the same. It is the lipoproteins that are different. Cholesterol is traditionally misunderstood and has been vilified since cholesterol itself is not inherently bad. In fact, the public's view about cholesterol and fat has been completely backwards over the last 50 years due to the outdated lipid hypothesis model and the numerous fat and cholesterol propagandas that's been run. As you've already learned through many of my episodes, it has been the sugar industry that has falsely shaped the public's view of fat and cholesterol. So what exactly does the LDL or the quote-unquote bad cholesterol do? First, as already mentioned, LDL cholesterol is a carrier protein that carries this life-saving chemical, cholesterol, to every cell in your body. The LDL cholesterol ship also transports energy at the core, triglycerides, that your body can either use as energy or store it. Second, and this is a critical point that is rarely mentioned, LDL cholesterol is beneficial for your immune system and is one of the body's strongest defense mechanisms. We are exposed to bacteria and viruses all the time, and one of the primary ways we neutralize is modulated through the LDL cholesterol molecule. What is absolutely new and groundbreaking? LDL is also part of the cancer cell surveillance system our bodies have designed. Another important function of the LDL cholesterol is that it transports CoQ10, a critical nutrient produced by the body that helps generate energy. CoQ10 is present in every cell as it is involved in making ATP. You can think of CoQ10 as a spark plug for the mitochondria in our muscle cells. Without it, you cannot use either sugar or fats as fuel for energy. CoQ10 also serves as a critical antioxidant and protects cells from oxidative damage. Low levels have been linked to chronic diseases. We have cell damage all the time, and the cell membrane repair requires cholesterol, and it has to be constantly delivered from outside the cell through this important LDL particle. So then, why have you not heard of any of these biologically essential roles of the LDL particle? As I've said before, follow the money. This can be summarized into 2 words: big pharma. Cholesterol-reducing medications is one of the most profitable medications on the market. Did you know 3/4, and I'll say this again, 3/4 of the FDA's funding for approval of drugs is provided directly from the drug industry? So, instead of the FDA serving as a regulator to regulate the industry, it's more of a partnership between the FDA and Big Pharma to see how they can maximize profits. Plus, many medical organizations are so regimented and stuck in their ways, no one wants to look at diet first. Billions and billions of profit dollars cannot be made with selling lifestyle changes along with the right whole food choices. The sugar, snack, package, and refined food industry gets to piggyback on their fortunes. They make you sick in the first place, and then Big Pharma comes along and medicates the problem. Now you know the roles and the politics behind the LDL particle. What are the keys to address that can save lives? For one, the LDL particle exists in different shapes and sizes. On the one extreme, they are the large, fluffy molecules called pattern A. On the other side, they are the small, dense particles called pattern B. Recent studies are clearly showing the significance of the LDL particle size. People who have mostly small particles have up to 3 times greater health risk than people with larger particles. However, the most important marker of all is the number of LDL particles called the Ldl Particle Number, or the LDLP as it's called by most labs who run this test. And yes, up-to-date doctors can help you get these labs done easily and cheap, I may add. In order to understand how cholesterol, the LDL size, and the LDL numbers are interrelated, imagine you're going to fill a bucket with either small, hard metal ball bearings or larger, soft tennis balls. The bucket is the total amount of cholesterol contained within the LDL carrier. The total number of balls is the Ldl particle number. You can fill that bucket with either ball bearings or tennis balls. The bucket will be just as full. But if your bucket is full of ball bearings, the number of balls in the bucket will be much greater. LDL cholesterol is the same. For a given level of LDL, having more small particles will mean that you'll have a much higher number of total particles carrying the same amount of cholesterol. This test may just be the strongest and most important risk factor there is for heart disease. It has a direct role to play in all these pathological processes. Again, heart disease does not happen without cholesterol finding its way beyond the arterial wall. The main new hypothesis: anything that increases the number of LDL particles in your bloodstream will increase your risk of heart disease. What also has to be accounted for is that the pattern A, or the large fluffy LDLs, also tend to carry more fat-soluble nutrients and antioxidants. It is these antioxidants that protects the molecules from oxidation, making them cardioprotective. Because pattern B has a much smaller particle size, they are much more prone to oxidation. Furthermore, they can enter the arterial lining where it can get oxidized and form plaque. This is why there is a high association between pattern B and cardiovascular disease. The LDL particle is an advanced risk factor that many health professionals still do not know about, and it is rarely measured. Why? Because most are still hyper-focused on just cholesterol. Not even my doctors or health insurance runs this test. I actually have to go to an outside lab. So, having high total cholesterol means you've got a lot of cholesterol in your body, but it doesn't say anything about which lipoproteins it's found in. So, it is critical to understand that heart disease is not, and I repeat this, not a cholesterol disease. It is a lipoprotein disease. Now we can get to the meat and potatoes of this episode. You are wondering, Jay, what causes the pattern B to form instead of the pattern A, the fluffy, large, protective LDL carriers? In the episode, Why We and Our Pets Are Diabetic and Dying, and I'll put a link in the description box below if you missed that important video, I credited Dr. Chris Kenobi for this mesmerizing chart. And I'll put another link in the description box below for you to watch his life-changing video. As you can see, in 1811 in Boston, Massachusetts, there were no heart deaths reported. Heart disease was an extraordinary, rare disorder in the 1800s to the early 1930s. By 1930, coronary heart disease becomes the leading cause of death, virtually unknown 30 years earlier. What changed so quickly? For one, thanks to new technology, we had the tools to refine carbohydrates, flours, grains, breads, sugars, juices, along with the addition of man-made polyunsaturated fats, or what is known as vegetable oils, or now what they're calling plant oils to confuse you even further. This now becomes the food of the masses. By 2010, 1/3 or 32% of deaths are now due to coronary heart disease. Nearly 63% of our diets now comes from these processed foods. And if you're following me and you're subscribed, and I know you are, then you know the driver behind this mess. It's called hyperinsulinemia, or high circulating insulin levels, due to the chronic overconsumption of carbohydrates, which then results in these chronic diseases like diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, dementia, and even Alzheimer's. And the big killer, inflammation of our arteries, thus heart disease. It's all interconnected. So yes, it is the refined carbs and the sugars that appear to be the primary culprits here. And this is what's going to shock you today. It's not only the sugars and the refined carbs to blame. These bad LDL particles will be present when insulin is high. Smaller LDL particles have been found predominantly in subjects with insulin resistance. So those that consume carbs around the clock, whether they are the quote-unquote healthy carbs like oats, whole wheat breads, are just as vulnerable to these bad LDL carriers as those who consume junk food. It's all the same. Carbs are carbs are carbs. Moreover, people who have a lot of small LDL particles tend to have low HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, and they also have elevated triglycerides, all of which are markers of insulin resistance and reflect increased cardiovascular disease. So, this leads to the single most important question of the day. How do we radically change the LDL carrier we have? It's how we structure our diet. For example, let's look at this extreme study comparing a very low fat, high carb, also similar to what you would see in a vegetarian or vegan diet, to a low-carb diet in people with metabolic syndrome. In other words, they are already sick. How were the key cardiovascular health markers that we care about affected? There was a greater decrease in body fat and, most importantly, intra-abdominal fat. This is the fat in between all of our organs that cannot be seen, that creates the insulin resistance in the first place. There was a significant decrease in triglycerides. I want you to look carefully at the HDL, the good carrier. There was an increase in the HDL cholesterol in the low carb group, and if we want to get technical, a slight drop in the low fat, high carb group. Most importantly, the low carb group saw a decrease in the damaging small LDL particles, while the low fat group saw an increase. This is why Big Pharma, the sugar, the grain industry who controls our healthcare institutions do not want you to see this, as it unravels the whole cholesterol model and throws it in the trash. What else do you notice? You had lower blood glucose levels, lower insulin levels, and just as important, an increase in insulin sensitivity. What they did not measure, and I wish they did, was blood pressure. And I bet that was significantly improved too. Improved enough that many would have been taken off blood pressure medications. This is what you should understand when switching to a low carb diet. Many of the risk factors will improve with carb restriction. However, the traditional LDL cholesterol may change. And now you know why. The whole premise is based on a high carb diet. We want a body that was evolutionary built to burn stored body fat for energy. We do not want a body only capable of using glucose. This leads to the mess we are in. It requires substantial amounts of insulin, the master storage hormone. So as carbs are controlled or even reduced, LDL levels may even increase. Why? Because pattern A's dominate. That bucket may be filled with the large, fluffy, cardioprotective LDL carriers, not the small, damaging ones. This demonstrates the importance of not viewing any one value in isolation. Instead, it may be better to look at the body as a whole system. Modern doctors and cardiologists are correct to a point. If you are still eating a diet high in carbohydrates, high cholesterol levels are then dangerous. Again, let me repeat this. That is, if one is still eating the standard American diet, because that is how doctors were taught to treat patients. What if we were eating the way our bodies were designed? Eating a diet that controls the master hormone insulin, thus allowing us to burn stored body fat for fuel while at the same time being able to use glucose for direct energy. A metabolically adaptive body, highly sensitive to insulin. That changes the whole model. I will create a playlist with more videos on diabetes, life expectancy, and diseases. You will learn the direct correlations between diabetes and high blood pressure, diabetes and cancer, and even how our A1C influences our standard of living. If you're on your desktop or laptop, I want you to use your mouse to click this upcoming box. If you're on your mobile device, just tap that with your fingers. The first is the link to subscribe to this all-important life-changing channel. The second is the link to that playlist. So have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are generally released weekly. Bye for now.